Let's face it, prices for PC parts are pretty terrible these days, with people asking exorbitant amounts for basically any piece of hardware that'll play a game. So let's have a look at a fairly decent mid-range PC I managed to couple together for about 470 Aussie, with RGB.
First, let's check out the combo I got that started off this build: an i5 3570K 4-core 4-threaded CPU, an ASRock Z77 Pro 3 ATX motherboard, and this piece of junk BitPhoenix case for 80 Aussie from the Facebook Marketplace. I decided to try out the budget god tier CPU cooler Brian from Tech Yes City goes on about, so I ordered this Snowman T4 CPU cooler from AliExpress for 33 Aussie, which took over a month to arrive, so let's hope it's worth it. For an SSD, I couldn't go past getting a few of these 256GB silicon power ones, brand new from Amazon for $38 each, and for mass storage I have a 1TB WD Red hard drive, which I priced out at $20, as I pulled it from a Lenovo server that's coming up in a future video. For RAM, I scored 16GB of a nice red kitted G-Skills Ripjaw 5 DDR3 1600MHz for just $60 from eBay, probably the nicest looking component in this build really. Second-hand power supplies are sometimes at crazy prices and sometimes a bit sketchy, so I bought a brand new Corsair CV550 80+ bronze, also from Amazon for 57 Aussie. Finally, let's talk about GPUs for a second, as basically anything with 6GB or more of VRAM at the time had been gobbled up to be used for Ethereum mining or being resold by scalpers on the second-hand market for ridiculous markups. I believe the current best bang for the buck is something like the MSI 3GB GTX 1060 I bought for $170 from eBay, as it'll play all but the latest AAA titles at fairly reasonable settings and is really good for less demanding titles like Fortnite and CSGO. The final cherry on top is this 30cm SATA powered RGB strip I got from eBay for just $8, as it'll bring some life to the build and is a great investment when you're flipping PCs, as people go crazy for a little bit of RGB. Adding all that up is 466 Aussie, or 360 US, which I think is a pretty reasonable cost to get into PC gaming without having to interact with a scalper or deal with bloated MSRP prices. As always, it's time to slap the parts together, show a bit of computer porn, benchmark it, talk about some temps, then come to a conclusion. Hope you enjoy. Talking about overclocks real quick before we jump into the benchmarks, I got the CPU to 4.5GHz at 1.272 volts, and the GPU only adjusted the memory up 500MHz to 4500, with the core boosting itself between 1860 and 1898MHz. Okay, now to the benchmarks, which I ran all games at 1080p, with the settings I used listed under the game's title. few CPU benchmarks I like to run are a 1 minute 4K 60fps DaVinci Resolve render, in which the CPU managed a fairly okay at best 5 minutes 37, but i5s were never really intended for 4K content creation. Up next is Cinebench R20, in which the CPU received a score of 1342. Again, not great, but it's more of a it will get the job done sort of deal. For temperatures, the CPU idled at 28 degrees, reached a maximum of 57 degrees after 20 minutes of AIDA64, and reached a maximum of 68 degrees under a combined GPU and CPU load. The 1060 idled at 20 degrees, hit 70 degrees after 20 minutes of Unigine Heaven 4.0, and reached a maximum of 75 degrees under a combined load. It's conclusion time, and well, the performance won't blow anyone away, but it's still a solid entry rig that can easily play esports titles with high FPS at competitive settings, and even does okay at Warzone, but it doesn't go too well with the train wreck that is Cyberpunk 2077. Adding something as simple as an RGB strip to your build can be a cheap option to give it a bit of customization, and definitely adds more value if you plan on flipping the PC, as people seem to go crazy for RGB.
There is a small amount of upgrade potential for a PC like this, such as upgrading the CPU to a 3770K and maybe replacing the GPU, but it's only if you can find either of them at some reasonable prices. So good luck with that.
If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, and if you really enjoyed it, please consider subscribing for more PC builds and other content in the future. If you have a suggestion, question, or criticism, leave a comment, and thank you very much for watching.